Last year, at the end of my virtual JaneCon video, I made a comment saying that I would most likely do a video about Sense and Sensibility. The reason? A new adaptation was announced. I was hopeful that we would have a trailer by the time the 2026 con happened, and thank the trailer gods, they delivered. What I didn't expect was the immediate discourse. I should have known better, honestly. Case in point, Pride and Prejudice. The reviews have been mixed by Austen faithful, which makes this video feel so timely. I'm not the first person to discuss the differences between the 1995 film adaptation and the 2008 production for the BBC. The passionate discourse just continues to prove why we love Austen's work so much. It's a timeless story about two sisters, both similar in many ways, yet opposites in thought. After all, who doesn't want to fall in love? But there is one area in all the adaptations that I personally believe changes how we view the films, and that would be the ages of Eleanor and Marianne. It makes the conversations between the two sisters change in very subtle ways in the film adaptations. The impact is the same, but the staying true to source material alters. So today we're going to look at the 1995 and 2008 adaptations, followed by a brief discussion of what the 2026 version might bring. Welcome to Sense and Adaptability, a Sense and Sensibility deep dive. I'm Brianna Michelle Meyer, and this is Virtual JaneCon 2026. Before we go into the adaptation talk, 3 quick things. I'm not going to go that in depth with the novel. I'm assuming in good faith we already know a lot about the book. Instead, it will be a little refresher for us all. Secondly, I am not the first person to talk about the differences between the adaptations. I'm just going to add to the conversation with my own thoughts and opinions. Art is subjective after all. Finally, I will not be discussing the more recent adaptation of Sense Sensibility that was done on the Hallmark Channel, as I have not seen it. The 1995 and 2008 versions are responses to the time they were created in or created in response to. I'm also going to be putting these adaptations into a timeline for us with other films and shows that are coming out at the same time. The story of Sense and Sensibility is a story between two sisters and the bond they have together. Eleanor, the oldest, is a sense, while Marianne is a sensibility. After the death of their father, the family estate and inheritance goes to their older half-brother. While their brother first wants to provide well for his 3 sisters and stepmother, his mind is changed due to his wife. That means the Dashwoods will need to leave eventually. Meanwhile, Edward Farrar comes to visit his sister Fanny Dashwood. He and Eleanor form a bond. Eventually, the Dashwoods move to Barton Cottage, a property owned by distant relatives. There, they meet Colonel Brandon, a man in his 30s, who forms a quick attachment to Marianne. Marianne, however, finds herself swept under the spell of Mr. Willoughby. Eventually, Willoughby goes away, and it is discovered that he is to marry someone else, breaking Marianne's heart. Colonel Brandon let Eleanor know that Willoughby had seduced and abandoned a young ward years before, resulting in Willoughby being disowned, hence the reason he needs to marry Beau. As for Eleanor, she finds out that Edward is to be married to Lucy Steele. Eleanor is heartbroken, but holds her grief inside her. More events happen, ultimately ending in both Eleanor and Marianne finding their own happy endings with Edward and Colonel Brandon. Like I said, a little refresher. Now here's where I go on my minor tangent. Eleanor is between 19 to 20 and Marianne is 16 to 17 when these events take place. Edward Ferrars is in his mid-20s and Colonel Brandon is in his mid-30s. Why is this important? This is important because it impacts how we view the 1995 and 2008 adaptations. The ages between Marianne and Colonel Brandon have been discussed in videos on here before and even in past virtual JaneCon videos. Of all the adaptations, Marianne and Brandon's age gap has stayed in place. It is Eleanor's age that has been changed. So let's talk about the 1995 adaptation of Sense and Sensibility. This adaptation was at the right place and the right time. Emma Thompson spent years working on the screenplay. It was her first one and she revised it over and over again into the finished product we see today. Now here's where things get interesting in my opinion. First of all, this adaptation was the first big screen adaptation of Sense and Sensibility. It had been adapted for TV twice, once the 1970s and once the 1980s. Secondly, the 1980s was a very popular time for period dramas, mainly from Merchant Ivory. If you know anything about Merchant Ivory, you know that they are considered some of the best period drama films of all time. The warm colors, the costumes, the top-notch casting. In fact, the costume designers for this film were from Merchant Ivory. As for the director, Ang Lee was selected for his first English language feature. Ang Lee has gone on to become a prolific director in his own right, and he does a phenomenal job with this film. The score was done by Patrick Doyle, a friend of Emma Thompson's, as well as Kenneth Branagh's. However, the score used in the trailer was from the 1994 adaptation of Little Woman, another film released by Columbia Pictures that did very well. As for the casting, this is where it gets really interesting. Emma Thompson was cast as Eleanor Dashwood. The character's age was then aged up to be in the upper 20s. Remember when I mentioned the ages? That's why. This change alters the dynamic between the sisters in a very subtle way. Marianne was played by Kate Winslet, who was around the same age as her character. This is also pre-Titanic Kate Winslet. 1990s it boy of English cinema, Hugh Grant, was cast as Edward Ferrars. He and Colin Firth were in everything during this time. Speaking of Colin Firth, we will get to him in a second. Colonel Brandon was played by Alan Rickman, who is perhaps one of the finest actors to ever come out of England. Greg Wise played Willoughby. He and Emma Thompson would later get into a relationship and get married. The movie was released to critical acclaim, resulting in multiple award nominations. In fact, Emma Thompson won the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. But that's not all. In 1995, a little 6-part TV serial starring Colin Firth was airing on the BBC. With Pride and Prejudice coming out months before Sense Sensibility, this movie was happening at the right place at the right time. Jane Austen fever was high around the world. Period dramas were continuing to be popular. Modern-day adaptations were starting to come out. This movie was part of this wave of nostalgia and modernism. But what about the 2008 version? I messed with perfection. I've talked about this before in past virtual JaneCon videos, that film and television are two different mediums. They have different rules that writers and directors must follow. But what if you wanted to create a new adaptation so that everyone forgot about a previous adaptation? Well, if you guessed Andrew Davies, you would be correct. The writer of the 1995 Pride and Prejudice, Davies wanted to create a version that was more true to the book. Told over 3 episodes, scenes such as Willoughby's seduction and his duel with Brandon were included in the BBC adaptation. Also included was a scene in which Edward Ferrars chopping wood in the pouring rain as an homage to the 1995 Bond scene. The casting for this version include Hattie Moran as Eleanor and Charity Wakefield as Marianne. Dominic Cooper was Willoughby. I do have to mention that the series was filmed in early spring 2007, and summer 2007 was when Mamma Mia was filmed in Greece. Dominic Cooper had a good year. The role of Edward Ferrars was played by pre-Downton Abbey Dan Stevens. Colonel Brandon was played by David Morrissey, who would later play the governor in The Walking Dead. One key area to note is that the actresses playing the Dashwood sisters play the characters to be closer to their ages in the book. This adaptation aired in the UK in January 2008, right in time for the holiday season. It aired later in March in the US as part of the Jane Austen season on Masterpiece. The coloring for this adaptation is a lot darker, gone are the warm hues of the 1995 film adaptation. Instead, this television series is a darker and grittier portrayal of the class differences and hardships the Dashwoods face. This now leads us to think about the upcoming 2026 adaptation. This will only be the second film adaptation of the novel. The casting so far looks fantastic. The color grade is darker, matching the 2008 series, but we only have a trailer to judge it on. My hope is the movie does the characters of Eleanor and Marianne justice and correctly. At the end of the day, the very heart and soul of Sense and Sensibility are Eleanor and Marianne. Time will tell what the conversation around the 2026 version will be once it is out. Some people are hesitant about it due to previous period drama adaptations that have come out in the past couple of years that did not meet expectations. That is okay. What I think is important to remember is that new generations should be able to discover and get their own adaptations. Then they can go on and watch the previous ones and compare. The discussion between the 1995 and 2005 Pride and Prejudice adaptations still happen. There will be discussions about this new version, how it compares to 1995 and 2008. That is the beauty of adaptation. Each version adds something new to the story. The Dashwood sisters and their lives continue to be deeply beloved and cherished by Jane Austen fans. Sometimes I wonder if Austen knew what she was creating when she wrote her novels. You can tell that this novel was near and dear to her heart, as it is for so many others in our current day. Regardless of how we feel about each version that comes out, one thing has always remained the same: the bond between the sisters, and that is the most important part of the story. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next year when I look at Mansfield Park and wonder why this novel is so hard to adapt. Because it really is.